Hey everyone, it's Wednesday. Last night went into the night and to this morning, so if we're a little tired, apologies in advance. How are you, Matt?
I'm tired. I'm okay. Yeah, I went to almost 12:30. It's a long meeting.
I think that's your longest one as a council member, but
Yep.
it was very full of a lot of things that I think residents are going to care about. And I think front and center is the mayor's budget message. For those of you keeping score at home, the mayor really wanted to emphasize four things in this budget. An equitable recovery for a better normal, getting back to basics with a cleaner, safer San Jose, accelerating solutions to homelessness, and fiscal resilience. These sound like really cool things, but Matt, like break down what's actually in there.
Yeah, so the mayor laid out that budget message back in March, which we mentioned to folks, and then we essentially locked that in with a bunch of other smaller investments that we'll talk about. In terms of the things you just highlighted, the priority areas that he's looking at for the equitable recovery, I'd say his signature item is something he's calling the Resilience Core, which aims to employ hundreds of young people in our community and help them get their first job, doing things that fall into the category of resiliency. So, fire risk reduction on the edges of the city where we have that kind of urban wildland interface. Tutoring young people who have learning loss through programs in our library and community center system, distributing fire extinguishers and supporting vaccination sites is something they've already been doing. So basically creating a core of young people, getting them that first job, helping them build skills, and helping them get on the path to lifelong employment. So that's kind of the signature item there. He's got some other investments in programs like San Jose Aspires, and Alfresco, which is about helping our businesses flow out onto sidewalks and streets and have a more kind of vibrant, walkable community, investments in broadband access, ton of stuff. On that second category of back to basics, I was a big proponent of this. All of you in the community told me how important this was, but safe and clean cities. So new investments in what we call Beautify SJ and really consolidating all of our services around blight reduction, encampment management, dealing with things like graffiti and trash and weed abatement, and putting more funding and staffing behind that. It's probably still not enough, to be very honest, because we just have such a great need there, but this is a significant increased investment in beautification, blight reduction, and better managing the place where we live. So I've been a big proponent of that, and the mayor funded that. And that includes that Cash for Trash program, in which we're employing in this coming fiscal year. We'll be starting July 1st, I should mention, we'll be employing 500 homeless individuals to pick up trash and keep our city clean. And then, of course, they're getting paid for that, which is great. And then on the homelessness front, adding more bridge housing or emergency housing, trying to reduce the population of people living on our streets, expanding what are called SOAR sites, where we're bringing basic services like sanitation and trash removal, case management out to existing encampments and trying to improve conditions in our encampments for both our unhoused neighbors and our housed community. And then finally, I just want to highlight in the mayor's budget message, I really appreciate his focus on fiscal restraint and responsibility. He's setting aside $80 million of the American Rescue Plan funds for the unknown and for what's ahead. And one thing we do know that'll consume a chunk of those dollars automatically is that we have a structural deficit. Our city's budget is about $28 million in the red just with current spending versus revenue. Now we're hoping to see economic growth, but it's pretty likely that next year we'll see a big chunk of those $80 million go to just filling in that gap. And that's something we're going to have to resolve over time. We're just trying to buy time for our economy to bounce back and our sales tax revenue to bounce back and those sorts of things. But he's also holding some of that money back to see how those one-time federal stimulus funds are spent by other agencies. Now, I had a memo, and ultimately I offered the motion to pass the mayor's budget message, and it passed unanimously. Do you want me to talk a little bit about the memo that I put forward?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I know it's kind of a lengthy update on the budget, but it is pretty important. This is
one of the biggest. It is the biggest thing I think you guys vote on all year.
Yeah, it is. It's been an intense few months as we've gone through this process for the first time, and it defines how we spend roughly $4 billion across all of our spending over the course of the coming 12 months, starting July 1st. So my memo was focused on those ARP funds, American Rescue Plan funds that have been held back, and argued that when we come back later in the calendar year, to assess the status of those funds and decide how to spend some of them, I would like staff to come back with an analysis of potential investments that fall into two categories, in addition to just filling that structural deficit to buy us some time, which the mayor had already prioritized. So one of the priorities I put forward was what I would call economic empowerment, and the other is making government more efficient. So on the economic empowerment front, I think that the focus of those funds will be on recovering from the pandemic and lifting up people who have been most harmed by the pandemic. And we know that that's our lower income neighborhoods where unemployment rates are still really high. And my hope is that where we put those dollars is in investing and empowering people to get employment, increase their incomes, reduce debts, and basically become financially sustainable, because these are one-time funds. So while we can just kind of give people money or run a nice program for a couple of years until the funds run out, I'd rather focus on investments that make people economically self-sufficient so that we're in a stronger position as a city overall when those dollars run out. And the same philosophy applies to that other category, which is the government efficiency bucket. And for that, I'm similarly asking staff to come back looking at city operations and maintenance of city facilities, and asking them to look for one-time investments we can make that create ongoing savings or ongoing efficiencies, where we will actually spend less to deliver as much or more in terms of services in the years ahead. Because again, to me, philosophically, the point here is that we've got funds, we should spend them in a really smart and strategic way that creates lasting value. There should be this kind of ongoing return on that investment, rather than the risk, which is we just sort of spend it once on things that sound nice, but offer no long-term value. I want to really invest those funds in people and in the capacity of your local government to deliver services better. So that was really the philosophy of it. Fortunately, it passed unanimously. I think staff got the message. I also got in there a final recommendation around goals-driven, accountable budgeting, which is something that we don't really do, and I really want to see more of, but I'll save that for another time.
Yeah. One last thing about the budget. So while I agree with your idea of like spending these things on like impact and maybe not one-off things, we do get a little bit of spending money on one-off things.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the investments we got for our community. I know I personally am excited about the leaf blower pilot. Shout out to the leaf blower working group for helping me craft that budget document. But yeah, I'll let you talk.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me of that. So there's an essential services reserve. It's about $3 million. And every year the council members get to put in all of their requests for basically small projects and pilots in their district, things that will improve quality of life in the district. We did a big survey, got responses from about 200 residents, got a lot of good ideas. And so we combined your feedback and your ideas with our own insights and things that we had been discussing with city staff. And we put together a bunch of what are called budget documents, where we make requests, we ask, well, what would this cost? And then we formally submit them. The mayor reviews them and decides which ones to prioritize in his budget message, the June budget message that we just passed last night. And you know, it's meant to be kind of equal across all districts. Every district should get a similar amount of investment. And it's not a lot. This is kind of a rounding error on the budget, but it's nice because these are typically small, concrete, neighborhood-based projects. So we put forward a bunch and we're quite successful, in my opinion. We got a wide range of things. So additional dumpster days, we reserved an extra 15, funding for an extra 15 dumpster days in neighborhoods across the district. We know how popular they are. We're also using them to be something more than that, neighbor days, where people can come out, meet with me and our staff, meet each other, have some coffee and donuts, and then throw away their trash, maybe do a beautification project. So we're really trying to build that out, and we've got some extra funding for that. We've got some really significant repairs in a couple of our parks, Glenview and Martin, Fontana. So we're doing some turf replacement and other repairs due to the damage done by squirrels and things like that. We've got on the, speeding and traffic safety has been a major priority from the community. So we're doing a pilot roundabout up at Hillsdale and Vista Park, which is in the northern end of the district, where there's a real issue with speeding and street racing and sideshows in the middle of the night. Very dangerous, very loud, a lot of complaints. So that was a big win for us to be able to secure that funding. We've got traffic radar signs. We've got 3 of those that we were able to squeeze into the budget. So we're going to work with folks. We definitely want to do one down around Leland, where we know there's a lot of speeding on Via Valiente and Camden. We'll probably do one up in the Vista Park and maybe over by Snell, where we just had another fatal accident due to speeding. And then maybe down in the kind of Cahalan, Santa Teresa area where there's a lot of speeding. But we'll be discussing with the community and soliciting your feedback. You mentioned the leaf blower pilot. Another creative one that I like is we're going to identify a couple of areas that have seen a lot of graffiti, and we're going to paint murals. So we've got some funding to do murals in a couple of high blight areas. And what we know from other cities that have done this is when you put beautiful murals where there's typically graffiti, you tend to get less graffiti, and they tend to stay pretty nice and actually can make the community look better and save money over time on less maintenance. So we're going to experiment with that. So a lot of cool stuff. And we'll, Liz, I think your team's working on a summary of those, right?
Yeah, so we should have something out later in the week, so stay tuned for that. But if you guys had just talked about the mayor's budget message, it would have been a full night. But no, you also talked about 2 other things that I think are really important to our residents. Let's start with maybe the less fun of the 2. Utility rates, garbage, recycling, water, those are all going up.
Yeah, so these were final approvals, and we've been communicating this for months. I think you all know that our garbage rates which is garbage and recycling, and our water rates are all going up and going up pretty significantly. And there hasn't been a lot. We have not been very successful at fighting that. So the water side is really, we have almost no leverage there. So on the waterfront, the price is being driven by wholesale rates coming from Valley Water primarily. And that's, most of our water is imported from the Delta. It's getting more and more expensive. Valley Water is investing in infrastructure. The mayor and I and others have pushed back on some of the investments that Valley Water wants to make that don't make a ton of sense. There's the Pacheco Dam that I think it's an extremely expensive project that even Valley Water staff indicates is not going to do a lot to expand our water supply. I'm not opposed to more reservoir capacity. I actually think the state's going to need that, but we should do it ideally with state funding, with kind of a statewide strategy, and we should do it in places that are going to actually have a big impact on increasing our water supply. But a lot of this increase is being driven by the required seismic retrofit of our largest dam, which is Anderson Dam down in South County, which is seismically unsound. And if it were to crumble in an earthquake, we'd have something like an 8-foot wave of water rush all the way into our downtown and just be a horrific natural disaster. So not a lot we can do there. The cost of the water at the Delta are going up. We've got to do this retrofit of Anderson Dam. That's a lot of what's going on there. But we're going to keep looking at it and trying to pick off opportunities to pressure Valley Water to keep their costs controlled. I do think they could be doing more, especially just around their internal costs in some of these infrastructure projects. On trash and recycling, another big increase. Part of this is that in this, so the rates change every 2 years, and in this 2-year window, we're being impacted by a couple of things. One is COVID had a big impact. We're shifting, a lot of our costs have been concentrated on the residential side because people have been working from home. The amount of trash has gone up, but also the amount of contamination of the recycled stream has gone up. So our recycling stream has value when it's clean. You can sell the cardboard, the glass, the metals. When it's got grease and water and other liquids and non-recyclables mixed in, it just has to go to the landfill. And so you lose the revenue stream, but you also have to pay to dispose of it. And so we've seen just big changes in those dynamics. And we were able to, the actual cost increase is 21%. We're capping it at 17 because we're using some reserves that we have, but in the long run, we're going to have to replenish those reserves. So we're stretching it out. We're going up 17%. Eventually, though, the true increase in cost is 21% for this next 2-year period. So the biggest thing we can do as a community is get down our recycling contamination rates. We do an audit every 2 years, and that actually affects our contract with the haulers.
Mm-hmm.
We will pay them less and their rates will go up at a slower rate if our contamination rates are lower. Roughly a 2% increase in contamination translates into about a 1% increase in the rates that we all pay. And that's a big part of what just happened here. We saw a massive increase from about 30% to 50% in the amount of our recycling bins that are contaminated, or the routes really. Yeah. So anyway, we're going to do more on that as well. We're going to do some, we're going to do a PSA and try to get people to learn more about how to recycle right, so we can kind of cap those increases in the future.
Yeah. All right. Last thing, much better news. I think you guys got a report back on Measure T and how investments in our community are going.
Yeah, and I worked on Measure T. In fact, I was a co-chair of the campaign, knocked on a lot of doors. It passed overwhelmingly. I think it was over 80% support. And I have to say, I'm biased, but I think it's the best run bond measure we've ever had in the city. We went out and bonded for about $600 million. We're actually still issuing bonds. We were approved to issue over 600 million in bonds, and those dollars have been deployed quickly and efficiently and with a lot of impact. So a big chunk of them have gone to road paving. We have a fully funded road paving program through 2028 that is leading to a lot of visible improvements out in the community. Hopefully you're seeing those, but we will be catching up on a very deep, long backlog of under-maintained roads, which has been a major frustration. So would rather not have had to issue a bond to do it, but we didn't have any other option, and those are being done incredibly well. We're getting 3 new fire stations, which are going to cut down on response time, emergency response times, a new 911 call center. They're in a dilapidated space. Operations Center and Fire Training Center and Police Academy training are all in very old buildings that are getting, they're going to be in newer facilities, which is great. Preserved 1,000 acres of land down in Coyote Valley. We're converting all of our lights to LED lights. We're about, I think, more than halfway through all the lights in the parks. Those will be done by the end of this year. So just a lot of, the bond was all about safety infrastructure, from flood protection to 911 response to roads and lighting. And those, I feel like our public works department has done a great job getting those dollars out the door and leading to real visible and meaningful impact in the community. So that is a bright spot. Sometimes I'm not so positive on government spending and how efficient we are, but I do feel like Measure T has been managed really well.
Yeah, they just repaved the road right down the street from me. I'm not going to out my address on the internet, but I'm pleased that I voted for that. I'm getting the return on that. So
good.
Yeah, that's all I have for today. Thanks for chatting with me, Matt, especially considering how late you were up last night.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks. I know it's a long one, but obviously the budget's only an annual thing, and it's a pretty big deal. So appreciate everybody's time and hope everyone has a great week. Take care.
Bye.